real intimacy, which we treat with respect, almost awe, is a divine gift. The ability to be intimate, it's godly. How it got turned into a sin is a tragedy. Of course, the abuse of something holy is a terrible violation. Well, we have a development in society called the Me Too movement. It's people who want to be famous, and they claim Me Too. Actually, it's a serious issue. But it's also a misunderstood issue, because some people say that the problem is caused by the abuse of power. When you give people power, they abuse it. So men who are in power will abuse or misuse their power by abusing women. Some say that the problem is caused by the lack of respect. Men don't respect women. And because of that, they will do things that are disrespectful. But those two problems or issues are not new. Power has been abused since the beginning of history. And men not respecting women? Do men respect women less today than 10 years ago? Than 20 years ago? 50 years ago? So there must be something else going on that we're suffering from. And that is not the lack of respect for women on the part of men, but men and women have both lost respect for intimacy. We have no respect for the intimacy. So if you were to ask the men who were accused of this misbehavior, if you would ask them, don't you respect women? They would say, of course I do. And they do. So then you say, so why did you do what you did? And their answer is going to be, what did I do? It was nothing. It was nothing. I said, I looked, I touched, I did. It's nothing. And it began, this problem, in the 60s. Because back in the 60s, both men and women decided that we're too serious about intimacy. Too many rules, too many taboos, too many regulations. This is not right, and this you can't do, and this you're not allowed. And it was just too much. So we decided that we should relax. Free love. It's not so complicated, it's not so serious. You have a little fun, what's the big deal? Everybody bought it. Everybody agreed that it was a beautiful idea. We're not uptight like our grandparents. We're not so rigid about the rules. We're relaxed. We're healthier. Well, now it caught up to us. Now it turns out that you can't really fool Mother Nature. Intimacy is what it is, and if you play with it, you do yourself some damage, and certainly you do society damage. So here's what happened. By today's standard, or by today's definition, what is intimate? Holding hands is intimate? Not according to the Beatles. I just want to hold your hand. No big deal. Is a kiss intimate? No, not necessarily. Is a hug intimate? Not necessarily. What is intimate? If you feel and you intend and you want to be intimate, then it's intimate. But if that's not your intention and that's not your experience and that's not what you're feeling, then it's not. So nothing is by definition intimate. It's all subjective. If you meant to be intimate, then you're creepy. But if you didn't mean it as intimate, then you're just having fun. How many misunderstandings is that going to produce? What, you thought I was trying? No, I was just being friendly. Or the opposite. What, you thought I was just playing around? No, I was being intimate. It's got to cause all sorts of problems. When the truth of the matter is that intimacy is a reality, certain things are intimate, whether you think so, feel that way, or intended it that way, intimate is intimate. So I had this experience with these teenagers in Minnesota. We had been studying on and off during the year, and they discovered the beauty of kashrut. So when the summer came, they were about to leave on their vacation time. They came and asked how to make their camping trip kosher. Every year they go on a camping trip. This year, they want to make it kosher. So I said, who's going on this trip? They said 8 of us, 4 boys and 4 girls, 16, 17 years old. Where are you going? To the boundary water area on the border between Minnesota and Canada. It's a very protected, pristine, natural river. And they're going to be, you can't take motorboats there. You can't take bottles. You can't take aluminum foil. It's really strictly, and they're going to be out in a tent for a week. I said, it's not kosher. They said, we haven't talked about the food yet. I said, no, the whole thing is not kosher. 4 boys, 4 girls in a tent, not kosher. And they were genuinely offended because these were really, really good kids. And they said, we do everything together. We grew up together. We're in kindergarten together. We go everywhere together, and nothing ever happens. In fact, he says, last year, one of the sleeping bags got a little too close to the fire, and it was destroyed. So he says, so I shared a sleeping bag. Nothing happened. I said, in that case, you don't need to speak to a rabbi. You need to see a shrink immediately. What do you mean nothing happened? And why are you proud of that? Really, you're in trouble. Get therapy. Obviously, what he meant was nothing else happened. All they did was share a sleeping bag. But is that nothing? That's not an intimacy? If that's nothing, when will it become a something? So we ignore or dismiss the reality of intimacy because we didn't intend it to be an intimacy. So it's as if it never happened. You can't get away with that. You can't fool Mother Nature. So many years later, I had an opposite experience. These women who came to our program, who were hippies, they were rebelling against convention, they were nonconformists, and as a result, they didn't take care of themselves because they weren't going to play the beauty game, the artificial, So some of them took it to an extreme. And it was not pretty. One particular woman who had gone really too far and had neglected herself terribly. It's almost like she tried to be offensive. The other women wouldn't share a room with her. I'll leave it to your imagination. And during the program, she wanted to talk to me privately. So I had this tiny little office or room or whatever. It had no windows, and it was really very small, just enough for 2 chairs and a little coffee table. So we go into the room. She is sitting next to the door, and she closes the door. So I said to her, leave the door open just She said, why? I said, because a man and a woman shouldn't be alone in a room that is so private. So she started to cry. She was sobbing. When she calmed down, she said, this is the first time anyone has treated me like a woman. So there are a number of observations about this event. Number one, if intimacy was a matter of personal feeling or subjective experience, she can close the door. There's nothing going on here because she intentionally made herself unattractive. So if it was just a matter of intention or feeling, oh no, nothing intimate going on here. But intimacy is not what you make of it. It is what it is. So you're not allowed to close the door, not because of what you feel, but because of what it is. It is an intimacy, and we shouldn't be intimate. That's number one. Number two, she worked on it so hard to kill off that whole thing with men and women and beauty and attraction, and she wanted to get away from all of that. And she worked really hard at it. And for the most part, she had achieved the effect that she wanted. Nobody thought of her as a woman in the romantic sense. But now, she sits down, and I say, man and a woman, and she realized, I want to be a woman. I want to be treated like a woman. That feels so right. It feels so... So she regretted her whole project of trying to get away from the man-woman. So again, it shows you can't fool Mother Nature. A woman is a woman. She tried hard not to be, but she feels like a woman. She reacts like a woman. She has the needs of a woman. Just because you neglect yourself doesn't mean you've changed your nature. So instead of trying to fool Mother Nature, we need to go to the opposite direction. When you see that something is not working the way it should, you don't run away, you go deeper. So if women are uncomfortable being women and men don't know how to be men, don't create a different lifestyle. Find out what really is a woman. Go deeper. And what really is a man. And that's how the Torah, by the way, and we just celebrated the receiving of the Torah for the 3,331st year. Every year of those 3,300 years, we were able to go a little deeper and find more beauty, more meaning, more direction from the Torah. And those who went looking for other alternative ways of being Jewish, they disappeared. So you don't innovate, you go deeper. Because if it's true, there will always be more deeper and more profound and more relevant ways of understanding the Torah. So instead of making everything parv, you know what I mean by not milchik, not fleshik, just a little parv, that's what's happening. Instead of doing that, thinking that that will make us all comfortable with ourselves, it's not working. We need to be much more comfortable with who we are. And the way to do that is to get deeper into what really is a woman and what really is a man, and enrich the experience, not water it down. So I remember how it began under the banner of equality. How society argued, the experts, the geniuses, they argued that relationships between men and women should be platonic. Why does it always have to be romantic and sexual? Platonic. We're just friends. So I want to say to this woman who was arguing this case, I said, so if a guy says to you that he feels really comfortable with you, no tension, because he just wants to be friends with you, and it'll work because he doesn't even think of you as a woman, just as a person. Would that be a compliment?
No.
No, I don't think so. But back then, in the 60s, it was, yeah, right, we're just all people. We're all people, we're all the same. So I said, I think about it in terms of being a Jew. If a non-Jew would say to me, I'm not comfortable with Jews. I don't like Jews. But you're I'm comfortable with. I mean, with you, I don't even think of you as a Jew. And you want to be my friend? If you don't think of me as a Jew, you're thinking about somebody else. So if you want to be my friend, but not think of me as a Jew, who do you want to be a friend with? You want to be friends with a woman and you ignore the fact that she's a woman? And this is called a friend?
Somebody's like.
It's an insult. So is there such a thing as platonic relationships? There isn't. Because if it's platonic, it's not a relationship. You're ignoring me. You call that a relationship? So remember that movie When Harry Met Sally? It was such a foolish. They were best friends, they did everything together, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, you're a woman. A beautiful woman. Like, where were you? So they make a whole drama out of it. That at some moment in a relationship, you could actually discover who you're relating to and realize that you're in love. That is so offensive. Can people really be that out of touch? So Judaism has always said a man and a woman is a male-female relationship. How profound is that? How deep do you have to think in order to realize this? And because it's a man and a woman, the relationship should be in recognition of that fact. You want to be friends with a woman? Well, how do you befriend a woman? By ignoring that she's a woman? That's offensive. How do you relate in a friendship with a Jew? By ignoring that he's Jewish, yeah, you're an anti-Semite. If I don't think of you as a Jew, you're okay. Someday you're going to discover I'm a Jew, and then you're going to hate me. It's so unreal and untrue, and only a really shallow, plastic society could behave that way and think that way and fool themselves that way. And then sooner or later, it catches up to you, reality hits you, and you realize, can't fool Mother Nature. So, in respect of each other, we need to understand each other. In fact, celebrating the giving of the Torah, the way it worked, the way it's described, the event at Sinai, God says to Moshe, gather the people at the foot of the mountain, and you come up the mountain, but nobody else, because anybody else who touches the mountain is going to die from the holiness. So tell everybody not to touch the mountain. You come up, and I will speak to you, and the people will hear. And that way, they will believe in you as well as me. In other words, if they hear me speaking to you, then they'll know to trust you, that you speak in my name, and they'll believe in you. So Moshe comes to the people and says, here's the plan. You stay down here. I'm going to go up on the mountain, and you're going to hear God speaking to me. And the people said, why? Why won't God speak to us directly? We want to see him. So Moshe goes back to God. I'm not sure what that means exactly. But he reports back to God and says, the people want to see you, not hear second hand. Here you speak to me, speak to them directly. And God says, kind of mysteriously, God says, that is very nice. I hope they always feel that way, that they want to see me. But no. Tell them to listen. They're going to hear me. They're not going to see me. So if it's a good thing, why not? It's been 3,300 years. That was the last time God spoke to us. First and last. So for 3,300 years, we haven't heard from him. And yet, here we are, not a holiday, just a regular weekday, and you're sitting here in a shul. And we're talking about Judaism. And we're talking about the Torah. How did this happen? How can you still be talking about something that is 3,000 years old and we haven't heard from him in all this time? This is what God was saying. The people want to see me. Why? Because if you love somebody, you want to see them. And if they would see me, they would get very excited because I look good. It would be very inspiring. But I'm not going to have that happen. I'm not going to let you see me. I want you to hear me. And that's because the excitement, the inspiration, the pleasure of seeing the one you love is very short-lived. It has a short shelf life. You see, you get excited, you get inspired, you get impressed. And then it's over. Because I've seen that. Been there, seen that, done that. What? the excitement that comes from seeing, on the one hand, creates some inspiration, and on the other hand, it dulls the relationship. So God says, it's nice that you want to see me. That's a good thing. But actually seeing me will make our relationship short-lived. It will not survive even a year. And I want to be related to you forever. So tell the people they're not going to see me, they have to hear me. If you hear me, then you'll get me. If you just see me, it'll destroy our relationship. So, on the one hand, we say seeing is believing. Nothing so powerful as seeing with your own eyes. Seeing is believing. Believing is not personal. So what is the benefit of seeing with your own eyes? What does that do for you? When you see something with your own eyes, then you are sure that it's there. I saw it. But does that bring you closer to who you saw? You can stare at a person for 10 years. You have no idea who you're looking at. Because what you see is only the fact. Okay, tall, short, fat, skinny, dark, light, and yes, definitely there. I saw it with my own eyes. But it doesn't go any deeper than that. So it does tell you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it's real. Because you saw it, now you know it's real. But you want to see a star that nobody else ever saw. You're not even sure that it exists. And then you look through the telescope and you see it. Seeing is believing. Now you know for sure that it exists. You have a relationship with it? Looking at something doesn't create a relationship. In fact, it does the opposite. The eye, vision, has its own pleasure. It's so enjoyable to look at a beautiful scenery. It's so pleasurable to look at a beautiful painting. And it's so pleasurable to look at a beautiful person. Oh, no insult, but a beautiful horse. Pleasure. So the eye has its own pleasure. So if you look at somebody and you enjoy, you're impressed, you're moved by what you see, the pleasure of the eye satisfies. That was great. I love that. You don't go any deeper. But when you don't see someone you want to get closer to, what happens? The desire to get closer becomes much more intense. It's like the love letters people write, haven't seen you in so long. That make me love you less? No, more. So a person wants to have an intimate relationship. The way to do that is, don't look at me, hear me. If you hear me, you know who I am. If you look at me, you know that I am. Thank you very much. I don't need you to tell me that I am. I need you to connect to who I am. And the only way to do that is by hearing me. And that's why there's this terrible, terrible coldness that we suffer from, because we don't feel heard. Nobody hears me. We had a rash of bombs going off in people's mailboxes in Minnesota. Police couldn't find the bomber, and he was known as the mailbox bomber. He would put these little bombs, and people would open their mailbox and blow their hand off. They finally caught him. Turns out he was a young man, maybe 25, 27, whatever. And in the court, in the trial, when somebody asked him like what he was doing and what he was thinking and why, he said, I had no other choice. I had to do that because no one was listening to me. I had to get their attention. So one comedian commented on that. He said, no one is listening to you? Okay, I'm listening. Say something. Ah, you have nothing to say. You know why no one is listening to you? Because you never read a book, you have no ideas in your head. Why should anybody listen to you? It's not that he wanted to share a philosophy. He felt unheard, probably as a child. And that is so painful. You feel so isolated and so alone, no matter how many people see you. But if nobody hears you, you don't exist. But everybody knows what you look like. They have your picture all over the place. If nobody hears me, I'm invisible. So God said at the giving of the Torah, no, you're not going to see me. Because if I let you see me, we will have a relationship for a week, and then you'll go look for something else. If you want me, hear me. Hear me also means know me. Because the only way to get to know somebody is if you listen. So I don't know if I mentioned this on another occasion, but there was an Oriental doctor who was famous for his diagnostic abilities. He could diagnose an illness amazingly, just with his fingers on the pulse. Everybody was talking about him. So one of the big hospitals in Boston, I think, invited him to come show his technique. They had a patient. They did all the tests with the machines and the sophisticated equipment. They ran all the tests and had a diagnosis of what was wrong with this heart patient. And then they called this Oriental doctor and see what he would come up with. So this guy comes in. He's a tiny little guy. He walks over to the bed and he takes the pulse of the patient. And he holds it. A minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. The longer he holds it, the more bent over he becomes, like he's tuning in, and he's really getting. And one of the doctors, American doctors, who was observing this, wrote an article about it later, and he said, I'm watching this guy, and I'm finding myself becoming jealous. Not of the doctor, of the patient. Nobody ever listened to me like that. Nobody ever tuned into me the way he was tuning into this patient. Anyway, the end of the story was that he finished his examination, and then in very flowery, poetic language, he described exactly the condition that all the machines and equipment had shown. The river flows and it gets blocked on the banks of and it turns, and exactly what was happening to his arteries and to his blood flow. But what this doctor came away with is he's a great diagnostician, but I would rather be his patient. Because to be heard like that makes all the difference in the world. And when a person feels that no one hears them, it is so painfully lonely, even though you're obviously visible and people see you, but that's not enough. So, is shaking hands intimate? Holding hands intimate? Yes, it is. How come I don't feel it? I shake hands with people. Well, the problem is with you. Your sensibilities have been dulled. But intimacy is what it is. And the proof of it, you shake hands with people all the time. Men, women, you shake hands. And it's really nothing. You don't pay attention, you don't notice, it's nothing. But then one time, you shake hands with a guy, and he holds your hand 2 seconds. 2 seconds longer than necessary. And all of a sudden, it's creepy. 3 seconds. Like, what is this? Let go of my hand, you creep. What? It's just a handshake. And in 2 seconds, it becomes creepy, offensive. So obviously, contact of any type that is friendly, if it's not martial arts, if you're not fighting, if it's an affectionate touch, it's intimate. Not the most intimate, but you can't deny the nature of it. It is intimate. How does any intimacy begin? With a touch. So it's nothing? What do you mean nothing? It's sad when that which could be intimate has become so familiar that it loses its power and you don't feel it anymore. But that's a loss. That's like a numbness. You're doing something intimate and it doesn't work for you. That's what people go to therapy for. I did something intimate, but I didn't feel it. Oh, well. You shared a sleeping bag and nothing happened? Get help. Real intimacy, which we treat with respect, almost awe, is a divine gift. The ability to be intimate, it's godly. How it got turned into a sin is a tragedy. Of course, the abuse of something holy is a terrible violation. So a sexual violation is the worst of all sins because what it should be is the holiest of all experiences, and you're messing up holiness? That's blasphemy. So you can't appreciate the abuse of something unless you appreciate what its use is. If you know what it's supposed to be, then you can appreciate how abused it is when it's misused. So the more you appreciate the holiness of intimacy, the more you can appreciate the violation of intimacy when it's not done properly. It's like all guilt. Why is guilt so bad? Why does it feel so bad? Why is it so destructive, so corrosive? Because it's a loss of innocence. To the degree that you are innocent, to that degree, guilt destroys you. Because the opposite of guilty is innocent. So the more you appreciate the intimacy, the more you regret the guilt. If you don't care to be intimate, why do you care if you're guilty? Guilty means a loss of innocence. Do you care? Is innocence important to you? If it's not, then don't feel guilty. If you don't enjoy and respect life, if you don't see the sanctity of life, then don't tell me that death bothers you. We are disturbed by death because we're so enamored with life. We're so pro-life that we have to be anti-death. If you're not pro-life, then stop kvetching about death. So a guy, he was a survivor, so you can't really blame him for anything. But every Shabbos he would come to shul and complain. God let people die. 6 million died. My grandfather died. My grandmother died. Bitter and angry. But he remarried when he came to America, and his daughter gave birth to a grandchild, his first grandchild. So when he showed up in shul, everyone ran over to him, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, and he was like, everybody died. God lets people die. God is... So I took him aside and I said, look, enough is enough. If you don't celebrate a grandchild's life, because you don't care about life, so stop complaining that God kills people. He's your kind of God. You don't like life, he doesn't like life. If you loved life, then you can complain about death. You don't love life, so stop complaining. It's got to, there are two sides of the same coin. If life doesn't mean anything to you, then you can't be terribly upset with death. If life is precious to you, then you have a right to be upset about death. So if you don't celebrate the birth of a child, don't kvetch about the death of a child. You can't have a one-sided value. And the same is true with intimacy. The Me Too thing, women are molested and they're abused and they're offended and what would you like instead? Just don't do that to me. No, that's neither here nor there. If you're objecting to one behavior, it must be balanced. It must be the opposite of another behavior, which is positive. So you have the positive and the negative. You have yin and yang or whatever that. Then you have a complete system. So what is the opposite of abuse? The opposite of abuse is if you respect intimacy, then you feel like you want to protect it. Then you object to its abuse. If you're abusing intimacy, that is offensive. Why? Because intimacy is so awesome and it's so holy, it's such a divine gift that if you don't know how to handle it, maybe you shouldn't, maybe you don't deserve it. And the same thing is true with men and women. If you don't respect women, then of course you're going to create abuse. Intentionally, not intentionally, viciously, carelessly, but there's going to be abuse. So what's the opposite side of that? You don't know how awesome a woman is? It wasn't so long ago that if a woman walked into a room, the lowest of the low, the grubbiest of men would stand up. A woman walked in. And they would be on their best behavior. They would stop with the wild, ugly stuff because, hey, a woman is watching. They would take their hat off. They had an appreciation. How real was it? How deep was it? How profound? They knew. A woman walked in, you have respect. Why? What were men so in awe of? What? Men are stronger, bigger, faster. How is it that these big men were frightened of a little woman? It's not what she looked like. It's not her physical strength. Men were in awe of women's creative power. You can make babies? Well, eventually making babies became less interesting and less exciting. So the fact that you can make a baby, I'm not so impressed because we don't want babies anymore. And if the fact that you can make a baby is not impressive anymore, then what talent do you have that we should respect? You can't even parallel park. And you don't know anything about football. So there's nothing left to respect. It was much better when men were in awe of women. It was better for everybody. And it certainly was not degrading women. It's a ridiculous idea. Feminists came and said, "Why are you opening the door for me? What do you think, I can't open a door?" No. Did men ever think women can't open a door? Did men ever open a door for a woman because otherwise she'll stand there and starve to death because she can't find her way in the door? Of course not. When you honor somebody and you do something for them, it's not because they can't do it themselves, it's because you won't let them do it themselves. Because for you, it's a privilege to do it for them. Same is true with honoring parents, by the way. You honor your parents by carrying their bag. Oh, are they that old that they can't carry it? No, they can carry the bag. But it is so much a privilege and an honor to be able to carry their bag for them. So it was not degrading, it was not put down of women. And then another thing. The laws of mikveh, that when a woman goes through her period, the husband is not allowed to touch her, they can't be intimate, she's unclean. And of course, women said, "Excuse me?" I don't know who did that or how that happened, but it turned out so backwards. For 2 weeks out of the month, husband and wife are not together because the woman is not clean. The real meaning behind it is, unless the woman's body is completely prepared and receptive for intimacy, the husband cannot have any intimacy. So what does that say? It says that the intimate life between a husband and wife depends on the wife. He cannot have intimacy unless she is in best form for intimacy. To put it really bluntly, a woman's uterus is so awesome that when it's not ready, you're not allowed. When it's ready, it's a mitzvah. This is a put down of women. In a society that hates the uterus, because it just complicates everything, it's the curse. A society that hates the uterus hates women because they usually come together. And a society that adores children and the uterus stands up when a woman walks in. That's how it always was in civilized society, decent society. So again, it's another example of where we decided that we're not going to have respect anymore because, we don't necessarily want to have so many children. So the fact that you can make a baby, there are more important things in the world. There aren't. There was one woman who said, You know, there's more to life than making babies. I said, for example. She says, being a doctor. I said, like a pediatrician? Being a baby doctor is more important than having a baby? If nobody has a baby, you're out of a job. And the same with every other job. If nobody has a baby and you're a lawyer, you're unemployed. You're a fireman, you're a policeman, you're a pilot, whatever you are, you're out of a job if we don't have babies. So why is the job to serve the baby more important than the baby? So anybody who says there are greater, more important things than making babies, wrong. There is not. There is not. So, women are not baby-making machines. The word machine is a little inappropriate, but as far as I know, the only machine that makes a baby is a woman. So don't tell me women are not baby-making machines. You can find a better word than machine.
Creator.
Producer, isn't it? If you're a movie producer, you're but if you're a baby producer, no, nothing. Who's going to watch those movies if we don't have babies? So I think if we regain respect for intimacy, the respect that it deserves, because it's quite awesome, and if we regain respect for babies and for family and for women, and we regain respect for the purpose for which we exist rather than the quality of our existence, we could have a really fantastically beautiful, meaningful, productive life. It's not that complicated. Just stop trying to fool Mother Nature. So why won't the rabbi shake your hand? Let's wrap it up this way. Holiness is whole, harmonious, united. Unholiness is fragmentation. Every man for himself. That's the way it was. The generation before the flood were so bad because it was every man for himself. Total fragmentation. There was no cohesiveness. There was no togetherness, unlike the next generation that built the tower to reach into heaven because they all cooperated. So they went from one extreme to another. So unholiness is disintegration, fragmentation. Holiness is togetherness, continuity, connectedness. So in an unholy society, holding hands is not intimate. Being intimate doesn't mean you have to be married. Getting married doesn't mean you have to have children. Having children turns around. Having children doesn't mean you have to be married. Being married doesn't mean you have to be intimate with your spouse. And being intimate is only if you think it is, otherwise it's not. So you have a total fragmentation. You can pick any piece you want. You want to be intimate? Fine. You don't have to have children. You don't have to have marriage. You don't want to be intimate? You can hold hands. It's not intimate. It has nothing. You want to have a baby? Fine. Does that mean you have to get married? No. Does it even mean you have to be intimate? Nowadays, you want to have a baby? You don't have to be intimate. Go to the bank, mix some stuff up, and somebody else will have the. It's just total fragmentation. Holiness is the opposite. A touch is intimate. Intimate means permanence. Married. Married means family. It's all one continuous thing. Therefore, If you're not going to have my baby, don't touch me. Because you can't fragment the relationship into little pieces like a smorgasbord. And I think I have a little of that and a little of that. And if you're not having my baby, don't touch me. If we have the proper respect, appreciation, it's not artificial, it's just recognize how awesome this thing is and treat it accordingly. There is no platonic relationship. If you're talking to a woman, be aware that you're talking to a woman. And what is the right way of talking to a woman? You're talking to a Jew, be conscious you're talking to a Jew. That should be pretty awesome. If we did that, we would simply be healthy human beings, and healthy human beings make a beautiful world. It doesn't take heroics, and it doesn't have to be a genius. Just be true to life. Don't play games. Don't try to cheat, and don't try to fool Mother Nature. And then we have healthy families, which means a healthy society, healthy children, which give us pleasure instead of agony. And that is the ultimate blessing, the blessing of nachas from children. And we should all have that, even if we made mistakes. Doesn't mean we have to suffer. So we should all have nachas from our children. We should all appreciate the gift that God gives us that allows us to actually be intimate, to make a deep connection with other people, each one according to what is appropriate. And that connectedness and that togetherness, we hear each other, we understand each other, we have a sensitivity for each other. That is not going to come from looking, that's pornography. It comes from listening. So we tune in, we listen, we hear, and people are happy. So thank you for listening. I feel heard.
Partner with Rabbi Friedman. Visit itsgoodtoknow.org/support.